No,
What a
prison for it.
classic story. Cars and people
Get a hydrogen truck.
with everybody. Yeah, but just
Better the crowd.
good as ever been.
Hydrogen run
Okay.
diesel.
Okay,
Basically, it's a hydrogen propane
where does that go?
diesel.
Okay. Let's call the village council meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Any additions, deletions, changes to the proposed agenda for this evening? Apparently none. Roll call.
President Schneider,
Present.
President Pro Tem Dyke, Councilmember Feldman,
Present.
Councilmember Glasser,
Present.
Councilmember Kuligowski,
Present.
Councilmember Powell,
Present.
Councilmember Stefan. Present.
Hi, Ed. Communications, I don't think there was anything except for, I see thank you, Elma Village Council, looks like, on Heritage Festival. Beautiful. Okay, consent agenda, minutes from our September 5 meeting. I've got a couple brief ones. Everything looks fine, except I'd like a little more distinction. Council manager comment time. The first paragraph, our manager's commentary, moving down to line 9, beginning with the word approximately 324,000. So the sentence beginning with, he also stated it was advised last week that the village earmark request was not approved. So I'd like to fill in language on that sentence and the following sentence, because anybody reading it not knowing what the heck we're talking about would not know what we're talking about unless they were involved. So village earmark request, I think after request it should state in the state legislature, so people would know what we're talking about. And then in the following sentence, we'll be working with our representatives. Who were they? So I suggest working with our state legislative representatives. So anybody reading it will know what we're referring to. Anybody else on minutes? General fund? Major streets, local streets. Parks and Recreation Fund. Downtown Development Authority Fund. Water tower debt. Sewer fund. Water fund. Equipment fund. Payroll register report. Water report. Still down. Lots of rain. Wastewater treatment plant monthly report. Usage report. Wastewater treatment plant monthly report for August. Police report. Ordinance enforcement officer report. Construction code authority, otherwise known as building permit report. Financial position report. Clerk treasurer's report. Just remind me, Kim, CVTRS stands for?
Constitutional revenue sharing.
Constitutional rather than statutory. They raised it.
It's city, village, township revenue sharing.
Right. Yeah, and constitutional, they can't play with politically, but statutory they can.
Correct.
How's statutory doing?
Well, it
Hmm?
was 2.33% lower, so.
Yeah, okay. Hmm,
So now in these ones, I noticed, so a lot of these were, our revenue is significantly more than our expenses, but DDA, sewer, and water are all our revenues, or our expenses are significantly more than our revenue. Is that just because of timing of tax collection?
Timing of tax collection, timing of quarterly water bills. So we don't have any revenue for the sewer fund yet because that won't be billed until October. Yeah, but it is a timing issue.
Under the property tax segment of your monthly update, the 273,000 in July, I presume the 269 is for August?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And it, but yeah, it wasn't clear, just presumed, okay. All right, entertain a motion.
Support.
Motion by President Pro Tem Dyke, supported by Councilmember Steffler to approve the consent agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Objections? Unanimously approved. Got everybody here tonight. Great. Now is public comment time for any item on our regular agenda item for this evening, which the regular agenda items is purchase of a wastewater treatment replacement pump, ordinance 180.2 and ordinance 193.8. Is there any public comment with regard to any of those regular agenda items? Being none. Okay, regular agenda item number 1, purchase the wastewater treatment plant replacement pump. And that is yours, Manager Trent, correctly?
Yes,
Correct.
thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, council. At your desk tonight, you'll see 3 quotes that have been supplied. We apologize that we were not able to acquire those before the distribution of the council packet last Thursday. However, we were in contact with vendors and we knew that these quotes were imminent and that they would be available tonight. The 3 quotes, just to give some brief background, especially for our newer council members, this is a continuation of a project that was identified 2 years ago for R&R of 3 pumps at the wastewater treatment plant. Due to COVID, 2 of those pumps were completed, but it took an extraordinarily long time to complete those projects as one of the vendors had manpower issues, and it took quite a while for the one pump to get completed. And so we reached out to a new vendor, Kennedy Industries, to supply a quote for an R&R of the 3rd pump. This is a well-known pump repair firm based in Wixom that I've had the pleasure of working with when I was in Grass Lake. They're well-known. They're used by many communities for pump repair and acquisition of new pumps. Unfortunately, the 3rd pump, when they received it and tore it down for inspection, the components were so badly worn that it could not be repaired economically. And so they ended up providing us a quote with a replacement pump, which ended up being outrageously priced $60,000. So we started reaching out to other vendors, one of whom we used before, Detroit Pump, for R&R of pumps in the past. They came in with a more modest quote of just under $18,000 for acquisition of a new pump plus installation. And then we were able to make contact with another vendor, which is the first one in your list there, Care Pump, that came in with a quote, including installation, of $13,251. Our recommendation with the investigation by Supervisor Farley regarding these manufacturers and the product that they're proposing, is that he's very comfortable with utilizing this new pump from Kerr. And we're familiar with the representative that we would be dealing with that used to work for Detroit Pump years ago. So they're very familiar with our product and our installation here. And so we would recommend that we move forward with your approval of the Kerr pump purchase.
So,
Two quick questions. How does one manufacturer come up with $60,000 and the other two come up with under 20,000?
I would have to use terms that wouldn't be allowed in public, sir.
My second question is more of a cybersecurity concern. Why is Clinton using a Yahoo account to send business email?
I'm sorry, say that again.
On this Kennedy quote,
Kennedy.
they've got the attention of Clinton Farley and they've got Almont Wastewater Treatment Plant at yahoo.com. So I don't know if these guys just are using an old thing that the wastewater treatment plant used to use, but we need to find out if Clinton's sending from a Yahoo account because that's not secure and not good practice, especially when we have protected village accounts now. Per the other invoice that says sent from Almont Wastewater Treatment Plant at almontvillage.org. So I would suggest that if you have companies sending to that Yahoo account, to send them notification to the village.org account and then shut that Yahoo account down. Because that could be a major security breach.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is an old email
Okay.
that Kennedy must have still had in their system.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're not using I just want to double check to make sure we're not using that Yahoo account. So
Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
good point.
So the two different manufacturers of the pumps, has there been any like historical data on longevity or, because sometimes you get what you pay for as well. Cheaper's not always better, I guess.
Clinton says he's familiar with the Fairbanks brand and that
Okay.
he thinks it's a very
Confident.
reliable pump. So
And then just a side note, I know once the retention pond was completed in the Drakeshire community, there was a set of lift pumps out there. I don't know if those are any use to the DPW at all, that were back there that the HOA was responsible for maintaining and rebuilding. At one point in time, I know they were looking into selling them, scrapping them, but I don't know what the end result of those ever were. So maybe worth reaching out to the homeowners association to see if they're any value. We can probably get them for pennies on the dollar to use somewhere else for them. So I don't know if they'll be applicable in this situation if they're still around, but
right.
worth a shot.
Sure. Thanks for that suggestion.
This is obviously equipment that is needed. So
Yeah,
we
and the
need
funds
to
are
do something.
budgeted for it.
So we budgeted for repair, but we're having to replace instead. How much is the difference on that?
Actually, surprisingly, the new pump is just a little bit cheaper than the R&R. So it's like buying a new home is cheaper than remodeling an old one, apparently. So
Sounds good.
What one do we currently have? Do we have the
we have a Yeoman's.
Yeomans?
Yeah.
So either one of these is not a Yeomans.
That's correct.
How positive is Kerr that they can hit that 12? If you look at the terms of delivery, Kerr is 12 to 14 weeks. Detroit is 16 to 18 weeks. And then Kennedy is 30 to 32 weeks.
Another good reason why we're using Kerr. I think Kerr can meet that delivery time frame.
the other comment I'll make is if we were going to rebuild and we found a new pump cheaper, going forward, we've done rebuilds in the past to save money. We might want to price both of them at the time of consideration to see which one is the best way to go.
Absolutely.
Because if you can get new for cheaper. And on that note, I'll make the motion that we approve the purchase of the Fairbanks pump for the wastewater treatment plant in the amount of $13,251.
Support.
Motion made by President Pro Tem Dyke, supported by Councilmember Glasser, to approve the purchase of the Fairbanks pump model 85422, size 4-inch. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Unanimously approved. Regular agenda item number 2, ordinance 180.2, second reading and up for adoption this evening. And this is our so this is with regard to our Planning Commission ordinance amendment
Correct.
and with the amendments in being italicized. And let's see. Okay. So this is what we had discussed previously, been discussed thoroughly at Planning Commission and previously discussed here. Does anybody have any concerns with the italicized language in the proposed ordinance? It's what we had discussed before in terms of that the Planning Commission needs to provide, needs to do new bylaws and must submit them to the village council for council approval.
Did we receive any public comment? Thank you.
Any concerns? So we had previously discussed this and there was a consensus at first reading. There was some in-depth discussion. So any reaction from council?
Looks good. Need a motion?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll make the motion
Feel free.
to adopt the ordinance number 180.2, Planning Commission ordinance amendments as written and presented, second reading.
Motion made by Councilmember Feldman, supported by President Pro Tem Dyke to adopt ordinance 180.2 relating to our Planning Commission, its relationship with the village council. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Objections? Unanimously approved. Regular agenda item number 3, ordinance 193.8, zoning ordinance amendment. Interesting topic, which we've been discussing, food truck use. This was addressed at our Planning Commission meeting. I think we had Caitlin Havens' very useful input on this. She is marvelous and handles it well. And so the most significant parts in terms of controlling food trucks, regulating, I should say, is under design standards, important 2 parking spaces, not 4, and the definition for them, and then the design standard set forth in sub B, sub A exempts food trucks are being operated as an accessory to the festival or village-sponsored event, like we had recently, and when located in R1 zoning district sponsored by a neighborhood association, are exempt from these regulations. And then the 5 regulations are set forth therein, and they were deliberately set forth in the language that's used so to not over-regulate. So we, in fact, would have at least somewhat of an open door for food trucks and not kill those enterprises, which was potential when we were addressing it earlier. And some fencing located on paved, properly drained surface, setback requirements, same as whatever zoning district it's in, must be located outside the right-of-way. And then rather than having to present a site plan, a plot plan, and providing information to, I believe, would be our village manager, indicating a letter of support by property owner, method of power, generator information, important, copy will appear county health department approval, hours of operation, days of the week, and a plot plan. So that was as light as we could make it, so to speak, but still with the needed regulation. So, commentary from council.
Some questions on how it would work. Is this for a certain period of time? If they wanted to come once a week for a period of a few months, do they resubmit? Or for every time? That was my biggest question here.
I think that would be part of the application process to make that determination with the vendor on how frequently they would plan to utilize coming to the village for food truck purposes. Obviously, they can always change their mind. They might say, I want to do it for, maybe 1 month, and then they find out that they have such success that they come back in and want to do it for, the rest of the summer kind of thing. So.
And then I'm not familiar with the use of a zoning permit. So that would be issued by the manager?
Yes.
And how does that process work? Or how do we envision that process work? Do we have anything similar right now that we can compare it to?
We do have a zoning permit form that is utilized by the staff to approve or deny certain projects that come in to the office.
What's an example?
I think a most recent example would be minor change in site plan that doesn't require the planning commission to approve it. So, the applicant would give us a sketch or a diagram of what they want to change. And we have a form that can be used to approve that so that they have documentation, and we have documentation internally as well.
So is there a fee?
$35.
Correct.
I guess I'm stuck on the fencing and temporary method to find the sales area. I've just never seen anything like that in any other community that's had like a food truck event. Usually they're stationary in a parking lot. There's 3 or 4 of them gathered in one spot. Usually there's never like defined markers to corral the people. So I was just curious the thought process behind that requirement. I could see if they were on a public road or something like that, but if they're in a dedicated parking lot or something like that, what's the benefit?
I think it's for safety value, and it does say, a temporary method to define the sales area. So if it's not fencing, they should have some cones around the food truck. So it's kind of like when a utility truck stops in the neighborhood and has to put the cones out. There should be a defined area where that area is.
This was set up deliberately so it would be handled by village administration, the manager. So it would make the process as smooth as possible.
So number 4 must be located outside of the right of way. Is that just to ensure that we don't have trucks parked in parking spots on major roadways? That way, I mean, I would consider in front of Chickies as an example, in the right of way.
Exactly.
The only other consideration I see here is maybe the use of generators to support some of these trucks and noise ordinances associated with that. I don't know if there's any thought or consideration with that and what would be applicable, like a certain decibel level, or as I was recently at a campground and a food truck came and they just brought this old, 1933 generator out and it basically, you couldn't talk so we might get noise complaints from something like that. So maybe a consideration for if a generator is going to be used, certain decibel level or electrical hookup supplied or something like that. Just something to think about.
So they have to provide that information.
Yeah.
In the application, it sounds like.
5, they have to
Yep.
provide that.
A decibel meter.
Not very expensive.
110. Tim, you have any concerns? This is a topic that you were
Well, when we
quite
talked about it,
interested in.
when we talked about it in planning commission, we talked about the process, and the process seemed a lot smoother than what I'm reading. Like, the administrative side of this isn't really, I mean, you can't define it in the ordinance, but maybe there should be a reference to the administrative form, and then we should see the form and have a better idea of how that works.
Creation of a form
Yeah.
available, I think that would be helpful just so people know what they need to put down there. Some parameters around it.
So, yeah, I mean, that's viable commentary on it, but we could still have first reading on this, I think, as it is. And maybe second reading be presented with the form. Does that sound doable?
Back to planning commission, because we originally were just to refresh my memory, because I'm drawing a blank on this one. We had a long discussion at first about regulating so far from the buildings, but when we charted that out, a food truck couldn't really sell in the village. It wasn't realistic. So, Dave, did we finally decide that it's up to the administrator's discretion of where the food trucks would be able to do their business in accordance with your final decision when they submit the form? That's what I thought. So that's
There is setback language in here.
Right.
What is
But if I'm
setback
reading-
requirements?
But if I'm reading this, I mean, when we discussed it, it made sense at planning commission, but
Yeah.
it should be subject to the same structure setback requirements in the zoning district.
How do they know what that is?
That's kind of vague to me and what that really means.
Well, each zoning district, I'm sure, has a setback, right? Commercial versus industrial versus residential versus.
That be defined on our form? Just to make it
Yeah.
easier for people, so they could understand what
Yeah.
the setback is, without having to dig through an ordinance
Yeah,
and figure it
yeah,
out.
Yeah, if it's on the form, I think.
So here's a question. What if you have like a trailer, not an actual truck? or a stand or like, you know, like his example, the festival is all different kind of stuff. But I mean, how do you make it where it's not too difficult for those people either? But as an example, like 2 parking spots, well, a trailer is going to take up 4.
Depending on the size of the trailer.
Absolutely.
Well,
So, I mean,
but in the
just gotta-
definition, it states from a vehicle. It doesn't, would you consider that mobile trailer a vehicle? So,
Well, it's plated.
Yeah.
It's considered
It
a
is.
vehicle by the state of Michigan.
Right.
Yep.
yeah, that is, I've seen a lot of smokers on the trailers and, yeah.
Does this address like an ice cream truck where it goes around? If it's mobile, doesn't need a permit. They're not stopping.
And a fence.
Quick, put out the cup.
Actually, though, a lot of those trucks do. They have the stop sign thing that swings out.
But there's one that drives around. I've seen them.
Yeah,
That's a little
my
van.
kids all go running. So those are outside of this if they're
I would say yes.
like mobile.
Stationary.
Mhm.
So obviously with the discussion, we think there needs to be revisions, which would kind of delay things.
Is there a rush in getting this?
Well, yeah, the season is going to be closing down soon.
Right.
It'd probably be snowing next week. So who knows with this weather?
So where the bulk, I mean, a lot of what we're talking about is being covered by the form. So
Right.
what amendments do we need to make to the actual ordinance?
I did have one other question about the design standard A. So it says village sponsored event and when located. Is that an and or?
Probably should
Not
be
it
an
has to be
and/or.
both.
Mhm. Yeah, I would think that should be an and/or.
And so in a scenario like the schools that have Kona Ice come pretty frequently, is that covered by either of these? Or does Kona Ice need to apply for a
If it's going to the
permit?
So if
school,
it's-
it's a private entity outside of the village limits, so
That-
it wouldn't affect us anyways, because the
Mhm.
schools
Like-
are not in our jurisdiction.
Kona Ice was selling in a subdivision.
And I think there's
Yeah, if they went to subdivision and,
Then that's an
Set up
R1
shop.
district. Right?
but as part of a sponsored neighborhood event and then.
Right, because if if a Kona ice truck pulled up and was in a parking lot for 5 minutes, if you're gonna be in the parking lot for 5 hours, yeah, then I think.
Then
that-
go through this,
They would
yeah.
go through this. I mean, if they're at a local event for 5 minutes, it's really not affecting local business that much, and they're not sitting on parking lot property for an extended amount of time. I don't know if that would qualify it or not.
Is there a length of time?
So it sounds like the form is going to be the crux as far as whether it moves forward. And we could present that when it comes up for second reading. Should it be acceptable?
Yeah,
It
because
doesn't, I don't think we would need to chew on it at our next meeting because it wouldn't be on our agenda typically.
it's my topic. Yeah, the method of power and generator information, again, on the form. You set the limits on the form, you're covered, so.
And now an allowance of hours maybe. Or defined time.
So we have a consensus?
I think sort of conditional is, I don't necessarily think our public notice process is that robust. It would be nice if we could get the word out to get some feedback. If people are interested in bringing food trucks here, like I would be interested to know if sounds reasonable, if this is consistent with their experience in other communities. I tried to do some Google searches of ordinances or permitting processes, and big cities I could find a lot on, like Detroit, Grand Rapids, Ann Arbor. They've got some pretty robust regulations, but for
Story.
comparable size of communities, I didn't find a lot. And I don't know if Caitlin had any background on that she shared with the planning commission.
She had background, and there was a discussion, I think, indicating that, yes, there's apples and oranges, large metropolitan communities versus ours, number one. Number two, I think there's already been a demonstration of interest here because it's been happening. So that's there. Number three, I understand you wanting to be very
Transparent.
defining. That's a good word, yeah. Sheet up and maybe you can see through it. You can't make the consensus conditional because we have to publish, right? So from that standpoint, it can't
Right,
be
right. That's what
conditional.
I'm not really conditioning it. It's just commenting on, I think that would be a good approach, is to seek feedback as opposed to putting a newspaper where no one will see it. I get a little frustrated with that.
Well, we have 5 or 6 actual vendors that we just used.
Yes. Like
Yeah.
if,
We could
Mhm.
reach out to and ask them, what do you see in other villages and townships that you go to?
on
I don't know
what's happening.
what we can put out there as far as getting feedback for when it comes back for a second reading. That second reading, we can either approve or not approve. But what methodology would you suggest? Hopefully not a village survey or monkey survey.
But I think we just had an event where there were a variety of vendors
Mhm.
in attendance. If we reached out to them and
Yeah.
said,
It's a great idea,
this is something
sure.
we're considering.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts?
Do we have all the contact information as to those 5 or
Like
6
we
vendors?
might have an
yeah.
audience member who could answer that question.
Sure we do.
Yeah, I would think, just want to make sure.
Are DEA events excluded from this ordinance?
Yes.
Right, yes.
Mhm.
Is that
The first section, the
Yes.
first section,
village sponsored?
village sponsored events and DDA events are excluded.
Is it okay if I ask a quick question? All right, are you looking at it because you just try to control and understand who's there? Is that the rationale?
And
The ra-
where?
The rationale.
Right.
Yeah.
There's,
So if there's an
there's,
issue,
there's a couple rationale. We have a food truck that pulls up into the right of way every Sunday and blows its, that blasts its generator and other unsafe and propane on Main Street every Sunday in the right of way. That's not safe, and it's not fair to the businesses. So when that started occurring, we wanted to have a little bit of regulation, but still have enough nimbleness to enhance food trucks to come, but do it in a safe and common manner where they're not blocking the right of way, not blocking parking spots, and not making a lot of noise and having an unsafe propane tank sitting out in the middle of Van Dyke with traffic going by. So I think that was the catalyst of having some sort of regulation. In the first go around with the planning commission, it was very rigid, so to speak. It was so rigid that it was making it so food trucks were not, it was not inviting food trucks to come. And that's exactly what we didn't want. So we're trying to find a balance between having food trucks come in and enhance the village, but also at the same time have protections for the village.
going back to propane, what's the concern on propane?
I don't think it's safe to have a propane tank and a generator sitting out in 2 parking spots in the middle of Van Dyke on a Sunday afternoon.
Well, in the road is tough, but if it's just propane, I mean, anything under 100 pounds can have a propane valve on it. So if it gets hit by a car, it's not gonna burst. It's gonna pop the pressure on it. So it's not gonna.
It's still,
Well,
it's still 40 pounds of steel being launched at 35 or 40 miles an hour down the road.
I'm not saying about it in the road, I'm just telling you.
But that's where it's sitting now, so if it's hit, it's now projectile going down Van Dyke towards the gas station.
Minus the propane, a food truck with having articles in the road right away, an allowed generator is not a safe or cohesive thing we want on Main Street anytime. Unless Main Street shut down for a festival.
That's fine. I'm just trying to figure out where it's going.
Hey, so is there any,
I'll only add on that, we've been talking about this for like 2 months too, so we have put a lot of deep thought into it, trying to find that perfect balance to enhance both ends of it, so.
Well, I'm just wondering,
Yeah.
the rationale of propane wasn't, like you explained, projectile or explosion, so.
It's just an unsafe situation. I mean, you got a generator sitting right in darn near traffic. There was no barrier. It's just on the side of Van Dyke.
Propane was feeding the generator.
Yeah, and the truck. So it's not even propane attached to the truck. It's just like set off to the side
So if
with a
that-
hose running to the truck.
So if they had a long enough lead and it was on the sidewalk, that would be okay, as long as it's not.
A food truck in the right of way is not okay at all. Minus the propane, minus the generator, a food truck sitting in the right of way on Van Dyke or St. Clair during normal business hours is not a safe, allowable situation.
it's not unreasonable regulation.
Well, I'm not saying it is, I'm just trying to. If it's just, you're just working, it's certain more about projectiles or the vehicle on the road, what it is, if it's a package deal, that's fine. Just so we understand it too, is what we're trying to plan.
I think it's a combination. It's the vehicle taking up spots in the right of way for the local businesses. It's the noise of the generators blowing a bunch of noise down Main Street that is noise pollution. It's the truck sitting in the right of way not safe with having elements sitting in the right of way next to it. I think it's a combination of all those things. It's not a viable place for a food truck to be doing business.
Just, I don't think that's what we are required
And I think it's a different situation during a festival. I mean, if you would have parked one of the food vendor trucks on Main Street during the festival, that's a totally different situation because it's a closed down situation without traffic going by or so.
Okay, any dissent that we essentially have consensus for first reading?
I don't think we have consensus. If we're going off of feedback, why would we have consensus? If we're going off for feedback, that means we might be adjusting the ordinance.
My perspective was that with this would not come before us again till 2 meetings from now. We'd have an opportunity to have that feedback and have an opportunity to see whether the feedback indicates that there should be anything changed.
I don't want something published if it's not, I don't want to pay publishing costs or have something published if we're unsure if it's going to be changed or not.
Yeah, I agree. I don't see a reason why we need to rush it. We can get some feedback, have a little more discussion on it.
Do we have a minimum time between first and second reading?
15 days.
So we could still have a first reading at the beginning of October and still vote on it the second week of October.
No.
The third.
Third.
It's the first week of November.
In the first meeting in November.
I don't see a huge crush of food trucks coming in.
So if we leave status quo, then we have, so we have no regulation with regard to the food trucks.
Between now and then, yes.
Yeah.
Which we currently have today.
Right.
Reach out to the local establishment that uses the current food truck that sits on Van Dyke and ask
Express our
nicely,
concern. Yeah.
could you move it to the parking lot behind your
Yes.
facility?
Yes. Then it's on private property?
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's propane tank. The chances of him moving it, yeah, the chances are
Slim enough.
nil to none. Yeah, well, okay, well,
I think
so
we
if
could
we,
still reach out and say this is a concern. We don't need to wait for it to.
You're probably going to see it come back when, why did we kick it down the road? That's what I anticipate, but whatever. So, so we do have some dissent, and it means we don't have a consensus, so it was not first reading.
I guess if we have that contact information, if people can reach out and tell them that we're looking for that feedback. If not, we're going to move with it as is.
First reading. And wraps up regular agenda. Call it tabled. Public comment time is coming up for agenda items. And I have a public comment before the sawdust hits the fan, which I'm thinking may be coming. I wanted to actually literally applaud everybody that threw their whole hearts and souls into the spectacular Heritage Festival that we had. Angela Edwards, phenomenal. Mr. Schneider, Andy Rose, Wayne, Pete, spectacular, just wonderful. Fantastic job. It was absolutely wonderful what everybody did. So, having said that, is there any public comment with regard to non-agenda item?
All right. Actually, I'm here really to say thank you. It's crazy. It's been a year. When you asked me to talk about a year ago, things were a lot different, right, with the DDA. At that time frame, I asked for your trust and confidence that we would make some changes. And we have, obviously, many, many changes. The results of the car show is really just the icing on the cake, but there's been so many different things we've been doing through the year, which is, I feel, been a huge impact. The DDA, the village, the community, from everything from moving our financials over and having Miss Kim, with the bank having it, which has been fantastic, to now partnering with the DPW on a regular basis. By the way, Brian and his guys were absolutely fantastic, right? They just did a great, great job. And I appreciate everybody here kind of really staying out of our way and letting us do what we needed to do, really. So that's really why I came to say thank you. I mean, the event was huge. We planned maybe 300 cars, 400 showed up. We had to pivot a little bit, but, we still made it work. I'm here to answer any questions or concerns anybody has, but really that's it. There are some hiccups that I think we need to go through, but that's any large event. You're always going to have a learning phase from it, but that's next year. Next year's going to be better than this year, God willing. The weather is as good as it is. Fingers crossed already. But the amount of feedback that we've got has been extremely, extremely positive. And, ironically, today I went home for lunch, pulled down my driveway, and 3 of my neighbors are standing there that have all lived here since the 70s and 80s that wanted to stop me. And I was like, this might not be good. And they all told me how amazed they were by it. And they loved it and were there. And they can't wait till next year. And, what really does the DDA do? And I explained all the grant work we do and who got money, like the Maria's pavement and all that stuff. So anyway, I'm just here to really just say thank you for your openness. Thank you for the trust and letting us work through things and fix things. And I promise you, it's only going to get better from here. Okay. But does anybody have any questions or concerns from the weekend that they want me to kind of cover or go over?
None for me.
See anything that you could improve on?
Yes, there is stuff that can improve on. And if you want, I could touch on that. One of the biggest things is running an event like that is there were 7 core people that spent hundreds of hours through the year working on this. Thank God we had over 45 volunteers show up to help us, right? Kids here, we're there. those volunteers were put in certain places. Unfortunately, that became honestly dangerous, right? We reached out, Angela reached out, and we do actually pay for this service. So we reached out to Andy to have his guys handle traffic for us, handle placing the barricades out. That had to be done by these kids and DPW. They manned it all day. We had people driving over cones, saying some very derogatory things to these poor kids. We should not be left to handle traffic flow. Angela did a fantastic job getting signage everywhere. You couldn't go any place without a sign on how to get around, where to find parking, where to find a business, contrary to what you're seeing on Facebook. It was everywhere. St. Clair was open to local traffic. That was posted. We had people going out there and unfortunately re-barricading it up and preventing people from coming through. I don't know who was doing that, but I went out there 3 times to fix it myself. And I think you told me 6:30, somebody
I was out there
re-barricaded the
5:30.
road.
Pulling it off.
So, you know, those are things that we need to have corrected going forward. Angela did reach out also at the time frame to have, if we couldn't handle it, do we need help from the sheriff department? That was turned down, unfortunately, right? And he left, but and I've had conversations with him. My brother-in-law is a sheriff. I have nothing but the utmost respect for those guys. But that needs to be corrected for next year. We can't have that again. That was a huge, huge safety issue. His guys that were there were great. I talked to Officer Retzler. I got his phone number. Talked to him. He's like, yeah, no, we weren't supposed to do any of that. I said, no, that's not the conversations we had. He had some calls to go on. Thankfully, he finally got us a car at about 1 o'clock. About 1 o'clock. Yeah, about 1 o'clock. And that was stationed south of town to help with traffic flow. And that was a huge help by having that. But my understanding is the chief and DPW Ryan drove around on Thursday and went to all the barricades and talked about how they're getting manned, who was going to be there. The conversation we had was at that time frame, just make sure you've got some of your volunteers out there, not to direct traffic, but to point the car show participants in the right direction. Go down to the next person or go see this person. That's all they were supposed to do. But they were literally handling traffic flow. So it was concerning. I wish he would have stuck around. Again, I'm not trying to blast anybody at all, but that is a concern. And next year, this festival is going to get bigger. We have to manage it better. But ultimately, and probably Angela will touch on all the greatness that came from it, but the amount of people pouring into businesses and spending money and doing things was huge. So appreciate everybody just for their time. And again, their confidence over last year. It is going to get better. All right.
Yeah, each time it should be a teaching experience,
Yes.
learning experience, and there's usually always room for improvement, but
And again,
this was incredibly impressive.
if we didn't ask for it, it's on us, but we did ask for it. And we paid for it. I think our budgeted item is $6,000 a year for support in that area. We're willing to pay for it. We need it there. So, and I'd rather keep it local than having to go to Lapeer. Not that we're not in Lapeer, but you're going to have to do what I have to do to protect not just these kids, but the other people that are participating. We had a truck, SUV at 1 o'clock, drive straight up the middle of the road. Straight up the middle. She wasn't stopping. We tried to get a hold of her. She was not stopping. Straight up the middle. Thankfully, everybody got out of her way, but she was not stopping. So that's very concerning.
The only comment I had on the signage, because I noticed it right away, well before the event was coming out there, but it seemed like the print on the sign was relatively light. So I knew what it was when I seen it, but a few of the ones I seen were really kind of faded. So just something to look into, maybe to challenge the printing companies. But I also like the fact that barricades were setting out well in advance. Everyone knew this was coming, so I was out of town for the weekend, unfortunately, but my wife and I had several chuckles about the people complaining that they didn't know this was going to happen. It's like, well, did you not leave your home in the last couple weeks? So I appreciate the proactiveness on that, but you're not going to make everyone happy.
No,
So
no, we're
just again, the print on the sign was just an observation I had, but I seen them on every corner.
Right.
I noticed them and recognized them, but I was like, wow, it just seemed kind of faded. So,
Yeah, and those are the
Yeah.
things we need to hear, and we're gonna
Yep.
look at it for next year, so. But we did go to lengths to make sure, we didn't want anybody impacted by it. The whole point was to have all the parking lots open, the vast majority of the streets open so people get downtown. And a lot of comment on the fact they're like, I can't believe I got downtown. Or last year we had to clog it all up with everything. So a lot of compliments on that for those that actually, read a sign. And like you said, paid attention for a long time. Angela's been advertising everything for how long? We announced Van Dyke was getting closed back in June. I mean, we've been talking about it. It's been out there.
Right.
So,
and maybe something to look into. I know it's always about money as well. Maybe some better barricades as well. Some of those like plastic, almost highway dividers that you fill with water
Yeah.
instead of the wood ones, so people can't move them.
Yeah.
Especially on a major, Michigan highway, would definitely deter.
So I talked to Brian about that, and actually he told me I think it's going to run us about 1,800 for next year to get some of those.
Yeah.
But we've actually already talked through that again on Van Dyke, just so that way people are not merging but getting ready sooner to understand what's going on. So we've looked into that plus some other ideas already. I mean, these are we started having conversations about next year. Well, at the beer tent Saturday night, really. But we are. I mean, really. I mean, that's what it takes to put this thing on. We've been meeting minimally 2 times a month for a core group, if not more, on making this happen. So, but we appreciate. I love construction feedback, as long as it comes with, hey, look at this, and maybe here's an idea, whatever. That I'll take. But some of the stuff that happened over the weekend on social media, I could care less because it wasn't worth it. But yeah. But anyway, appreciate your confidence. Any questions? We're here to answer them. They're going to want to say a few things, but thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Any additional public comment? Hello.
I know most of you guys. I'm Melissa Schneider. I'm on the DDA board as well. I echo a lot of what Andy did say, and I know that I have very limited time. So it's unfortunate that Andy did leave. And I think my biggest concern about coming up here was I don't want it to feel like a personal attack, but obviously as an entity, we do need to evaluate how things went. And we've been preparing for this for a very long time. I'm going to say this. I'm going to be making that motion that we do not reimburse you guys. My understanding is that you will be paying for the police's salary, but I cannot, I mean, there was one thing that we really needed them to do, and that was stay at both ends to ensure the safety of our participants and our volunteers. And we are paying we're earmarking $6,000. And if they're not doing that, and then we see that they are posted sitting in the school parking lot, we get people saying there's 2 officers in the school parking lot. There's 1 officer at the park in his uniform at his family function on the job. There's another one on Research Drive over by the water tower. And what are we're paying these officers to sit in vehicles in other spots other than when we need them. My concern for next year is that we're not going to get these volunteers because their parents are going to say it's not safe for them, or the schools say we're not going to allow them to have this get school credit because it's a liability for us. So not only did they not do what we needed them to do, maybe they potentially hurt us for the future because it is so hard to get volunteers. I'm trying not to be emotional about this, but we've spent so many hours preparing for this, and we don't get paid. And to have people who aren't getting paid, like Clinton helping us out, running to do make sure that these 2 stations are closed down, and the DPW and other kids. And then 5 minutes later, the police start to finally go down there, and we're saying, no, we need you down there. They're like, both of us can go down to this end. No, we already have that handled because you guys didn't show up on time. And we needed you. It's disappointing. It's at first frustrating, but mostly disappointing because we should all be working together. And the